And good afternoon, everyone. Things are becoming so timely with the information flowing at lightning speed. The changes are so vast that things that normally would have taken 6 months or a year are happening within a week. It's even difficult to keep up with what's happening, how fast new laws, new everything is moving. From the food shortages, one day there's enough, next day it's in complete shortage and run out of a country. So the way it's moving, you're always playing catch up right now with the information flow. So as we move, we're going to move back to a pioneering lifestyle where you're going to be required to take responsibility for yourselves, your security, fire, so many things. So I'm here with Ken today, Pinball Preparedness. You can find his feed right over at prepper.com, Pinball Preparedness. Now we live in the same neck of the woods, if you will, and we have the same mindset. And you see behind me, if I'm using this as a prop here because I have that much that I need to overflow it as a prop set here. If you're not already like this, you're going to have to quickly speed up. You have days to weeks left before the lockup in the economy, the devaluation of the dollar, and the inbound that we can see broadcast across the way. Now, I hate to use the word administration, the people that pretend they're running things are now saying that there'll be nothing for Christmas, stock up now. There's going to be shortages everywhere. So where does that leave you and I? Hopefully we can get some good information today. So Ken, thank you for joining me, because I'm really interested. I see a bunch of your videos on YouTube too. And it's the time that we really take action, compare information, and maybe there'll be an idea or two that somebody that hasn't heard or listened to us before will come out and say, hey, thanks for bringing that. I didn't think about that, but it could save their life.
Thanks, David. Yeah, appreciate you having me here together with you and everything like that. So watch your stuff all the time, DAP 2030, for all the folks on my channel that aren't familiar with who David is. David is one of the preeminent people in the prepper community. For those of you that know about the podcast that I do with Tradcat Night, David is also one of the contributors over there with Eric. So, got something like that in common besides having Tennessee in common, but definitely two of us of a similar mindset wanted to get our thoughts together because, nobody's cornered the market on good ideas, and, something that he's got as an idea, maybe something that I haven't thought of, and we wanted to get together to share those ideas for each other. Of course, you all know I'm in YouTube jail on Pinball Preparedness right now, so I am working on the backup channel of Pinball Prepping. So like most of us, we have backups just in case this happens, so we can keep getting the word out to you guys. But again, thank you, David, for getting us together, and let's talk about some important stuff.
Timelines. So the world is waking up to what's happening now with the shortages occurring everywhere. And Ken, in one of your last videos, I saw you saying that the normies were waking up. So what that means is, before, people like Ken and myself, we saw these cycles repeating and we knew these things were trickling in. And now it's more of a tidal wave where you can see it from the beach rolling in. And it's going to be everybody out at the stores buying and preparing. So, I mean, what's a timeline before you think the general masses, the general public wakes up and sees there's a problem and they go, oh, I didn't prepare, and they're going to run off and buy, carts and carts and carts of things all at the same time, increasing the shortages where there's going to be no replenishment of the stores because it's going to be bought out so quickly. So what kind of timeline are you looking at for the normie awakening until there's lines waiting to get into the supermarkets because everybody's panic buying?
I think we're already there. And I think this started over the weekend because all of a sudden, to use the term normies, where are normies getting their information from? ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, whatever it would be. Okay. All of a sudden, starting last Friday, the mainstream media has started to come out and say, gee, there's shortages. And in what I've seen at the stores, in what people that follow my channel have reported to me seeing at the stores, is there's a lot of people that are all of a sudden panic buying and going in and buying camping gear, buying flats of vegetables, canned goods, whatever. and ransacking stores. I did a video where I went out to 3 different stores here by me on Sunday, and the places looked like it was, the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. I think there's a lot of people are starting to wake up already. And then from other information that I've heard from people in the stores is there's nothing else to backfill all this stuff. So the problem that they have, and this is, for those of us that have been long-term preppers, like anything else, they're buying at the top of the market. They're buying when the can of corn is now $1.25. They weren't buying when the can of corn was 50 cents like we all were. So they're getting whacked for the high costs. And that's just, then shortages, supply and demand is just going to drive costs even higher. So thank God that, those who have been doing this for a while aren't choking on the cost of, food, not only to eat now, but to put back in their preps.
And another thing about the preps, we've gone through more than a handful of things that were terrible after we bought it. We tried it. We're like, never going to buy that again. Like buckwheat, tortellini noodles, and say, just a lot of things that you think might be good when you buy it in a 3-pack or something. You're going to need to test everything, see how salty it is, go through a pre-rinse on a lot of things coming out of a can to remove some of the sodium.
Yep.
See if it's it to your palate, and do you even know how to cook it? Yeah, it's great that you could have cans of this, tins of that, cases of this, but if you don't know how to prepare anything and you don't have backups for wood burning to be able to cook something outside in a controlled environment, even when it's raining, your power shuts off, your gas shuts off. Okay, you got wood, you can cook, but are you going to cook in an open fire? I would hope that you have some protection around it. There's so many things going so many levels deep just beyond having the food.
Right. And then you bring up the cooking issue. A lot of us have kind of tunnel vision as to our particular situation. You in somewhat of similar situation I am, in more of that rural area where you've got some land. But you think about those people that live in an apartment. They don't have a backyard to go outside and start a fire. So how are they going to cook inside? And they need to think about something. So this is when, maybe sterno comes into play. People need to, prepping is not a one size fits all. Everybody needs to think about their own particular situation and prep accordingly there. I mean, you probably see the same thing I do a lot when people say, what should I do about this? And you need that. You need a bigger scope in what their situation is, because you can't just answer a question with a blanket answer.
Yeah, it's like scuba diving. How long will a tank of air last?
Yeah, right.
Right. Same thing. Literally the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of tanks, LNG tanks, or whatever kind of propane tank you might have, who's thinking about the adapters to take that from a 20-pound tank down into your 1-pound tank, and then be able to put that into a cook stove where you actually cook in your house? Or
Right.
having an adapter that would take that 20-pound and reroute it through the 1-pound, so it would still fit on like a Coleman cook stove that usually has an attachment for a 1-pound bottle, but have an adapter so you could put a 20 on there so you could run it for a much longer time. There's so many, and those things are only a few dollars right now. And to think about that, to be able to refill your own 1-pound cylinders with something that costs $4 on a little attachment that you screw on and turn your tank upside down. Please remember that the gas is not going to go, and you got to turn your tank upside down and let that liquid run into your 1-pound. I mean, these are little things that people, I just have from experience of learning that, oh, I need that part. Right. So how much you practice in the preps too? I mean, can you start a fire with a magnifying glass? Can you start a fire with a broken bottle? I mean, really, when you get down to it, your lighters have run out. Can you start a fire just in general without having a lighter and like Zippo fluid?
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you know how to use a ferro rod? Do you know how to use a bow drill? Anything like that. I mean, simple stuff. You say it, I say it, so many. Prepping is not buying a bunch of gear and going, oh, I'm good. Do you know how to use it? And I mean, it kills me when I see people go, well, I've got all, and it's still in the original packaging. It's like, you have no clue how to use it. Use the stuff and make sure that you know what you're doing. Because, one of the big things I tell people all the time about gardening, you don't just put a seed in the ground and poof, you get food. You have to learn. You're going to make a ton of mistakes. And now is the time to make those mistakes while you're learning something. SHTF is not the time to go, gee, I've got all these seeds. Let me go start a garden. Oh, crap. All my soil is clay. Why won't anything grow? And it's the same with anything. With, like you said, do you know how to make a fire? Go out and practice. You can do it now when, there's no worry about getting shot at. You don't want to be trying to practice making a fire when all of a sudden there's marauders running all over the place going, oh, look, somebody's out there trying to make a fire. Let's go see what we can get from them.
Ouch. That's not a very good morning to wake up to now, is it?
I have a habit of slapping people upside the head with reality.
Yeah. And, the political unrest that's going to accompany this. So for those of you who are just watching for the first time, I follow the solar cycles on 400-year cycles or further back in the once in a 2,000-year cycle that has upset routinely civilization. There's civilization apexes and then declines. And you wonder what triggers the apex. And then off of that, if they have the highest technology, mathematics, art, engineering, et cetera, for that time period, and they suddenly collapse. And you have to ask yourself why, because it's been going on for the last at least 8,000 years prior, where they have recorded, stories and actual good information about societies that were at an apex, pottery making. There's a million things, but they collapsed. So what was the collapse trigger? And that's really what set me off on my first study there. And it's the change of the growing and the harvesting season based on the cycles of the sun that cool the planet for a very short period of time, 10, 15 years. But when you're looking over 400 to 500 years of time, a little 10-year blip is nothing. But if it does collapse a society, you can start to see the pattern. And when you see the pattern, you start to get three things that happen every one of these events. It's grand solar minimum: population decline, civil unrest, government overthrow, and then also population migration. So you can already anticipate at least three of these. So you kind of get a little threat assessment. Okay, what's happening? You can already look out a little bit into the crystal ball and know that, look for glimpses in the news of these three things happening. Population migration, well, that's pretty much been stopped. You're kind of locked in place. Countries are completely locked down. Nobody's going to be migrating to Indonesia from, let's say, Canada at the moment, where that would have been a great choice. Can't grow food, too cold, hyperinflation. Hey, head to Indo, cheap, equatorial, abundant food year round. But see, the powers that knew this same cycle was coming back had locked the planet down. So now we got one checked off. So now we're looking at the economic implosion. We got cryptocurrency rising. And then you're talking about October 15th. And I keep hearing this October 15th again and again and again. So I'm just wondering, kind of out in your scope of things, what are you seeing for this October 15th or at the end of October? It seems to be an enormous amount pinpointing to this date of economic something.
The only thing that I can look at in something like that is the markets, okay? The stock market, the bond market, whatever would be. And it's not like we have futures expiring or anything on the 15th. I can't for the life of me figure out why anybody's picked this day other than it sounds good. It's the middle of the month, whatever would be. It's a Friday. Bad news comes out on Fridays. I'll believe it when I see it, but I cannot for the life of me find anything that's concrete that says, oh yeah, this is the day we've got to watch out for, because there's actual reasons. This one just to me looks like somebody pulled a date out of the thin air and says, oh, this is the day the economy is going to collapse. Now, historically, September and October suck for the markets. We've seen what's gone on. September was lousy. October has not been good. The market's kind of bouncing all over the place. But there's no strength, and you have a lot of analysts calling for demise of economies. Citibank said yesterday that China's going to see 30% inflation. You start looking at things like economic problems, and that's just going to exacerbate on bigger problems. The Chinese economy collapses. What do most companies or countries do when the economies collapse? They go to war. I mean, think of the Weimar Republic in Germany back in the 20s. Okay, we went up in World War II because how'd they get out? Nazism and everything like that. Same thing again. It's civil unrest. It's war. It causes problems. But pinpointing a day is crystal ball stuff.
And the thing about China as well, if you think that there would be confrontation, every good that's manufactured there will stop on a dime. So how prepared are you for what's in the ships right now? And that's it for years or decades? Because you see after some of these, really aggressive conflicts that it takes decades, plural, to repair everything and bring it back online again, even to remotely where it was prior to that conflict. Supply chains, manufacturing, the facilities themselves, the ports are always damaged, rails are damaged, everything's damaged, power plants are damaged. So if something does go off, you can anticipate that there's nothing else coming from China. And that's really a sad thing because all the eggs are literally in one basket over there for the world's manufacturing. I mean, how long would it take for us to bring all that back to the United States, retool, start heavy metal smelting, steel production, aluminum smelting, that sort of thing again, and then bring the economy back up where we have a manufacturing base? Even when we started with the Manhattan Project today, it would still take what, 7-8 years to achieve that goal. And there's really nothing pushing from behind. We're not backed into a corner just yet. So, thinking about conflicts and inflation, that's one thing. Chinese are starving. They lost so much out of the fields last year, flooded their warehouses and storehouses. And with the new information and political statements and CCP mandates, buy energy at any cost, buy food and import it at any cost. And if you know through history, the potato famine in Ireland, when those people were starving on the side of the road, they had the army transporting food out for sale, export market wise, while the people starved in the country. Now, I think it's going to happen again. You got to be kidding me if you think that they're going to be nicer this time, when through history, you see that famines, there's still food grown, but it's exported, higher bidder. And then China comes out and says, we'll buy it at any price, any price. This should you should have like tingles down the back of your spine when you hear statements like this from the CCP.
Well, I mean, you look at this. I mean, go back to World War II, for example. The day World War II ended, Europe was in ruins. How many people were displaced? Okay. It wasn't like, oh, the war's over, poof, Monday morning, everybody goes back to work and things are back together. It takes forever to rebuild a country like that. Then you look at China. China's three biggest industries: manufacturing, okay, no power, the factories are down. Second one is industrial equipment, mining, whatever it would be. Gee, we have an aluminum shortage, we have a steel shortage, whatever it would be. They have a coal shortage, so they're not able to mine. Third biggest industry, real estate development in China. Between those three industries, which are all in a complete disaster right now, that's 75% of China's GDP. That's what China is hanging on by fingernails. I did a video on this the other day. You think of the US economy. For about 50 years, between the 20s and the 70s, we were a strong manufacturing economy. We hit a peak. It got too expensive to manufacture here to create the goods. Everything moved over to China 50 years ago. China is now where the US was in the 1970s. Now you're going to see all that manufacturing move to Vietnam, Cambodia, wherever it would be, where they can get the cheap labor again. And China's going to be in the same situation that we were in the 70s. Remember what we had in the way of inflation in the 70s when it was manufactured here. Now imagine the inflation goes on to China, and like you said, you can't get the stuff on the ships because there ain't any more coming. Okay. And we don't manufacture it here. So where are you going to get that pair of blue jeans, that new pair of tennis shoes, those towels you need, a blanket, whatever? If you don't have them, you ain't getting them.
Or you repair it like our grandparents did. And there's a tire shortage for farm equipment to even harvest this year. So the MRO part to the maintenance repair operations and different repair parts for farm machinery is not coming either. So I don't know how many, there's at least 10, 12% at last count of all harvesting equipment laying idle because it's broken. It doesn't have tires, doesn't have whatever repair part that needs to be in there. Something's broken. And I saw who was it? Cliff High. He was talking about transmissions for 18 wheelers and different parts of mechanical device in the engine, specifically drivetrains and transmission assemblies not coming. So then we have another whole part of the supply chain affected where trucks are going to start sitting idle on the road because they don't have repair parts either. At what point do you start cannibalizing all the other junk that's laying around, literally like salvage yards, etc.? But will it fit into newer model vehicles? And can somebody have the skill, if it doesn't fit and it's maybe, an inch too long, does somebody have the skill to then shrink that down and keep it with the same tensile strength so it fits into some of these newer engines? I'm going to say no. So
Right.
what are we left with then if things just stop running and there's no way to repair them? Are we going to go back to pulling horses again to plow fields and harvest crops? I mean, what kind of yield declines are we looking at? Massive, massive yield declines. Plus, the manufacturing of fertilizers is ongoing. This will be the newest thing coming into spring, is the fertilizer shortage. So without fertilizers, how's the crop yield going to decline bushels per acre as well? So look out a little bit further. They're already broadcasting that there's going to be fertilizer shortages coming in for this next year. So yield declines there. How much could really be planted with all the broken machinery? You have to start subtracting digits off of this yield and available food tonnage, pure and simple.
And then you get into the fact of, what is China short of more than anything else right now? Food. And what are they going to go after? Food. Well, gee, if all of a sudden the United States or, Europe or wherever you got food, I mean, we all know China is buying up land in North Africa like crazy because they can grow food there. Well, if the Chinese, or pick a country, really doesn't matter, sees that, gee, the United States or Mexico or Canada or Venezuela or whatever has no way to defend themselves, and obviously China puts a lot of emphasis on their military. If they're still strong in that and we can't fix machinery, they can come right in and either take the land or buy it, or say, hey, we'll give you the parts or we'll give you a tractor so you can work your fields, but we want half the food. That's what's going to end up happening. They can literally, I don't want to say threaten, but squeeze us to a point where we have to support them, because if the only manufacturing going on is going on over there and they've got control over all the parts like you talked about, they hold us hostage at that point.
And again, how quickly could something be retooled here in the States to produce parts for those machines? I mean, that you're talking about putting up an entire factory assembly line to knock out widgets, basically. But how many different widgets would you need? Thousands and thousands.
Mm-hmm.
And really, even bringing it back down to it's simple CNC lathes to try to even put some kind of molds together. I mean, we outsource all that. Even initial molds are all done in China too. So even just the very basic concept of bringing something so you could stamp it, that's not even done in the States anymore.
Right.
Injection molding for plastics, all that's done in China. We got nothing. We can't even make plastic bottles barely in the United States anymore.
Mm-hmm.
All that's over in China. So, I mean, even the basic, we're talking literally from starting over literally 1940 again, like you stated, after the war, bring it all home, set up whatever, and then start again. We're at that same precipice again. It seems like we're just spinning in circles, and these resets are planned on a certain time frame. They call it the fourth turning. There does seem to be validity on an 80-year cycle. 5 of those is a grand solar minimum, by the way, 80, 8 times 5, 400.
Yep.
So as you look back in history over not just 200 years, 500 years, but several thousand years, you can just look through history and see this ebb and flow on the 80-year cycle, the 400-year cycle, and the 2000-year cycle, all based on external forces, but then it affects the human, and how does the human behave in that dire duress situation? And that's the spooky factor. Hungry people do strange things. And then how do you protect what you have when strange people are walking across your property saying, hey, they got light, they must have food?
Yep. Well, look at the grand solar minimum and empires. Empires collapse during the grand solar minimum. Your average empire lasts a little more than 200 years. Well, the United States, a little more than 200 years. It's about time for a change. You can't really say, a grand solar minimum has affected the United States because 400 years ago, the United States didn't exist. But if you look at the empires in Europe or the empire, you know, the Chinese or the empires in Asia, they have a tendency to collapse during a grand solar minimum because of colder winters, hotter summers, lack of food, et cetera, you know, crazy weather patterns, things. That's what we're in for. And a lot of people try to dismiss it as pseudoscience, but you can go back thousands of years and verify all that data.
Some anecdotal evidence here for the US during a grand solar minimum. Where did Thanksgiving come from? They landed in the 1600s during the Maunder minimum and nearly starved because they couldn't get their crops to grow when they arrived here.
Right.
You think about the original boats floating over, early 1600s, and they nearly didn't make it. So then the whole glorified story of, hey, we'll share our, no, that was a starvation thing going on there. And also there's Mississippian cultures. And if you go back in, and when I say Mississippian, we're talking about the earth-built pyramids of the Native Americans here, collapsing right around 1200. I mean, they had vast societies up until 1200, a full-on collapse. They started to rebuild into around 1200, 1300 or so, and then they got knocked back again. And you can start to see it even here with the drought cycles and the rise and fall of Native American societies, civilizations over, depending on regionally where you're at in the US. And then the Mayans, 800 AD, they just suddenly disappeared. That's right, the same time the Tang Dynasty in China collapsed. So we got two different societies at apex. I mean, the Tang Dynasty, for those of you that don't know about China, was considered the apex of the apex of the apex of everything in the known world at that time. Knocked out at the knees, Mayans as well. So it's happening on two continents at that point where you can start to then connect dots around on these specific timelines. So we're here again. Now, you know, how would governments react if they knew it's here? Okay, so it's just a certain amount of people have this information that we're back at this cycle again. This time you have 8 billion people. You know they're going to get angry. You know they're hungry. They will get hungry, and they're going to be fighting for food on the streets, and they're going to want change like every single time. So how would you control that so you and a person in power wouldn't be as threatened? You know, that's kind of where it rolls back down to is, it seems to be a lot of measures to keep people split up and keep a large, even wider moat between power brokers and the individual citizens. And you can see all the plays going. Everything is about division. Everything is to keep people apart, keep us up from them. Everything, you know, work from home. That is the perfect excuse for everybody to disappear. Work from home. Now what? It cut a bunch of CO2 emissions from traffic, et cetera. Where did everybody go? I mean, where literally are all these people that were running these companies, the CFOs, COOs, CEOs? Yeah, they still appear on a camera somewhere, but where are they? Poof, gone in the wind. Work from home. It's great.
Well, and the other thing about the work from home, and again, you can take technology right into that as well. You know, it's a running joke almost, but social skills of a generation, if not two now, are completely gone. Okay. Younger people, for the most part, don't have the ability to have social interaction. They're very awkward at it because it's easier to sit there and text each other. You know, I've seen my daughter do it. You know, be sitting on the couch next to a friend, and rather than talk to each other, they're texting each other, and they're 3 feet apart. You know, so now you're getting that almost trained from the work from home, trained out of people to have social skills. So now if we have a big event, people are going to be uncomfortable, if not untrained anymore, to deal with people on a social level, which divides us even more, which makes it harder and harder and harder for communities to get set up until you have that one person comes up and says, I'm in charge. You're all going to do what I tell you to. And everybody goes, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
It's a dangerous mind training exercise.
Right.
Because when things go wrong, you know, what do you anticipate? You're pretty remote. I'm pretty remote too. But, you know, the whole saying goes, half a tank of gas to come out to Murad, they're going to want to go back to their home base. Can they get a second tank of gas? and how far are you outside the population center, and how easy would it be for them to find you down the dirt road, turn right, turn right, turn right, turn right, down to the very end, dead end of the road. That's kind of where it comes to. But suburbs are going to have a much more threat base to them than remote countryside. But eventually people might start wandering out. So if you're looking at safety issues from remote countryside back toward country towns, and then back into suburbs, and then straight into the city, what are you thinking about?
Well, I mean,
How
just
quickly would they get out to the countryside is what I would ask.
very quickly. I mean, just look at the migration pattern, if you will, during COVID. People left California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey like crazy. Where did they go? They went to Texas, Tennessee, Florida. Those were the three big states. They weren't moving to, Dallas, to Houston, to Miami. People were already moving to the country. The mindset in the cities is all the food's out in the country. Let's just go there. They'll come very quickly. It's not going to be months. I mean, obviously being out in the more rural settings, we're going to have a little heads up. They're not going after tiny town Tennessee first, but give it a week, give it 2 weeks, and the migration's going to start coming very quickly. And the infrastructure, if you will, and I'm not talking about governmental infrastructure, I'm talking about places to live or whatever, buildings to keep people, is not set up in the rural areas to take an influx of that many people. I mean, there's 250,000 or so people in Knoxville proper. My county has 19,000 people in it. If 10% of Knoxville decides to head this way, that doubles our population for the entire county. There isn't the housing to put these people. So what happens? Now you have all those skirmishes. I need a warm place to stay. There's a house. We're going in.
Yeah, in my little town, 900 people, under 1,000.
Yeah.
And it's the same, stay in the barn. Nobody is going to accept your offer to stay in your barn as a place to stay.
Not when you're in the house.
Yeah, not if I'm in the house and I say, yeah, you can stay in our barn back there. They're going to be like, no way. What am I, some farm animal? And they're so entitled too. They come in a dire emergency situation, yet they expect to have, 1,800 count thread sheets and hot showers and home cooked meals served to them on golden platters. Yeah, you're going to stay in the barn. Make sure you keep the goats warm out there. No, I can't do that. And then they're going to, oh, you have to let us in. We got the kids. Then, really, what are you going to do when people come knocking on your door and asking for food? I got kids, I got a family, these are real world situations we're all going to have to deal with here in probably under 6 months or maybe a year max. I would say probably less. When people are going to come out knocking on your door.
Right. And
then what? Really, what do you do? Because
Yeah.
you just can't keep blowing them away and stacking them up like firewood out front. That just doesn't work in a human sense anyway. If you're thinking that way, you're not welcome in our community out here at all.
Yeah.
It's like, really, I mean, stacking people up like firewood after that. Yeah. And until when? So there've got to be different situations. I know, threats are one thing, but people walking around saying hungry, you got a family, whatever, and then you can deal with that. So, what have you, how about, I don't know, give us, what would you do if it was somebody with a family came knocking on your door and said, my kids are super hungry, we haven't eaten in 4 days, and this, that, and the other. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a very good thing. I brought that up this morning, actually. What happens when you have the 7-year-old kid whose parents died shows up on your porch? Are you going to turn them away? Or the pregnant woman who's there, all by herself? You're going to turn her away? I mean, those are realistic scenarios that's going to happen. And you hear people, in the euphoria say, oh, I'll give them a sack of rice and a lunch bag, with a couple of potatoes, an apple, and a sack of rice, and say, be on your way. Well, you do that 10 times, and then there's 10 people that are half a mile away from you. As they all get together, they're like, well, they gave me that, they gave me that, they gave me that. Well, gee, if they're giving all this, sack of rice or whatever, what else do they have? And those 10 people now all come at you at once. Now you have a problem. So you could, by doing that, inadvertently create a attacking force against you. So, a more logical idea at that point is to see what they can offer to be part of your community. And I say this a lot of times, everybody builds their mags in a perfect world. It's like, oh, we have our 15 people or whatever. Well, 15 people is not a community. You're going to need a lot more than that, because there's a lot more work that has to be done, a lot more skills that are needed. So what skills do those people have that they can bring? Hey, one's a mechanic or a tool and die maker or something, like you said before. Maybe they can help fix the vehicle that you have, or the farm tractor you have. And that we're going to be forced to build communities that are going to be bigger than just our mag. And if those people are showing up at your door looking for food or a place to stay, what skills do they bring? If they don't bring any, then you've got an issue. But if they bring some skills, figure out a way that you can utilize them.
And you brought up something really incredibly important there. Pregnancy. Like, how many people are ready to give birth not in a hospital? And you take a look at this more pioneering medicine. What if you have an injury? Are you able to treat that on the spot? Hospitals will be closed or very difficult to get to. What your med kit got in there? Tourniquets, great. Splints, awesome. But if you're going to have a serious injury and sew somebody up, do you have the antibiotics there to try to treat the infections? The list goes on and on and on. But just a most basic thing you talk about, within this 9-month period, people are going to be given birth. Women, not
Right.
Men, women.
Yes.
But when's the last time anybody was a midwife out in the countryside that gave birth outside a hospital? You could probably count them on your one hand in your county or even your part of the state. So that's a whole nother thing to think about too, is then how do you care for the infant if they don't have, enough milk, or they don't have, if the woman's malnourished and not going to be producing that much milk. And then do you have any baby formula around? And the guys I talk to on the dairy side of things are like, huge problem inbound. We need to get way more efficient, way faster with the dairy and the milk byproducts, or the dairy, milk powders and infant formulas, et cetera. That's just one little super tiny thing to even think about. But how much of a strain would it put on you or your community to have to do that?
Right. And now also with that one baby, that's going to takes for certain one person out of the work crew. Okay. Because that mother is going to be either sleeping or breastfeeding or doing whatever. So you've got to feed her, but you're getting no productive work. The baby somehow is going to be fed, doing laundry. There's going to be one person in a mag whose sole responsibility it is to do laundry, to do everybody's laundry. I said this the other day. Think about doing laundry if you're not loading up the laundry machine. You are literally washing one piece of clothing a day. Family of 4, you're doing that all day. Now, imagine you have a baby in there. Everybody says, well, cloth diapers. Great. Cloth diapers have to be washed once the Pampers are gone. Now somebody's got to do all that. That one pregnancy is going to create more work for not just the mother, for the whole community, without getting anything in return.
And how many of you have a washboard? And how many of you know how to make soap?
Right.
Even something real simple like that's not a lot of things that I must say, on a prepping list, the washboard is probably not even on most people's list. How to even use a washboard. And then the soaps. Eventually your store-bought soaps will run out. Right. So campfire, how are you going to get what you need to make some soap? And that's a skill in itself. Candle making, soap making. These are old world skills that need to be brought. If anybody that come to your front door and said, yeah, I know how to make candles and soap, I'm going to give them a big hug. Come on in.
Yeah. And then you talk about, like you said, washing clothes. Can you find a washboard? It's not like you can go down to Walmart, buy one right now. You're actually looking at antique stores to get one. So, there's that issue. then how many people are going to be out in the local lake, the creek, the pond, whatever, washing their clothes, taking a shower in there? Well, let that happen for a couple of months, and that water is now too polluted for you to do anything with. Your Berkey is not going to clean water that is basically sewage at that point.
Yeah, then you're talking about distilling and then running it through a filter.
Right.
I mean,
and how many people have a still?
No, I do, because I want to make alcohol from the fruits. So then I have a tradable, but then I also have medicine, because the heads, if you triple distill the heads up, then you got rubbing alcohol. Right. So I'm thinking having a still to be able to, alcohol is going to be a tradable through it's been a tradable for what, 8,000 years during, I don't care what time, it's always tradable. But to be able to manufacture that, to create your own medicine off of that byproduct, that's where you're going to get a lot of benefit too. So I'm trying to think in many directions on how to use a still water, so many things that you could do with that.
I mean, I don't have a still. I am looking and getting one. But yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point there in making medicine from it. I mean, it's more than just making your whiskey or whatever it is. It's making medicine, or distilling water, which was my reason for it. But making the medicine is a huge reason to learn how to do something like that.
And again, controlling the temperature on that. So what kind of device do you have to be able to regulate temperature while you're trying? Well, boiling water is one thing, you just roar away. But if you're going to do any distilling, you need to control the temperature a little bit better than you would on a roaring fire just to boil water. And again, that's a practice thing, and I'm just getting into it. But I have a burner under it, so I can regulate the temperature, and that's way different than, all right, you're out of gas, now you got to go to wood. Good luck keeping the coals, all the perfect temperature under there. I mean, people are going to go absolutely insane trying to just deal with the changes, to just regulate and have just even the most basic of life. People are going to be frazzled beyond belief. So, I mean, it's all this mental preparation for these events as well, and the spiritual side of things, and understand there's greater powers and energies that are with us all the time here.
Oh, I mean, and that's also the misnomer, and you probably hear it just like I do. We see it, where people kind of like, let's just start already, just bring it on. And it's like, you have no idea what you're asking for, and, trust me, I pray to God that we never go through the situations we all prepare for. I hope my preps are only for, gee, the power went out for a couple of days and that's it. Or it's, gee, honey, we don't have any more green beans in the pantry. Can you run into the prepper stock and get me a can of green beans so I can make dinner? I'm hoping that's all it's for. In case it's not, all right, that's what we put it for. But the day they stick me 6 feet under, I hope when somebody's inventorying my house, it's like, oh, look at all this stuff, and it goes in a garage sale somewhere. But the people that are hoping to have to use all their preps, I think are just looking at life unrealistically. They've war gamed this out all in their head, how it's going to be their little slice of heaven, and they have no idea that it's actually going to be their little slice of hell.
Yeah, after day 2, it's going to take a direct left turn, and they're like, I didn't expect that.
Right. And that's going to happen to every single one of us. I didn't expect that. There's a million things that can possibly happen that you're going to have to make a split-second decision on that you had no idea to prep for.
Yeah, discharge rounds too. You're going to have to live with that for the rest of your life. That's not something you do like Tuesday and you forget about it on Thursday. That stays with you for life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, mentally coming into a lot of these situations, I mean, sheesh. And again, so timelines on this, let's say something did happen on the 15th. Like, what kind of timeline duration do you think almost all the chaos would kind of just shake itself out of the rug before things will be back to stability, where if you had your community, you could plant and harvest unmolested because the marauders would be gone, taken care of? Society would have re-nestled itself back down into some sort of normalcy. You're looking at 6 months, a year, 2 years out for something like that to return. And I hate this word normal because they tricked everybody with that one. But in terms of something where it's not, your safety is not such an issue and things have stabilized.
Well, and again, personal opinion here, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with grand solar minimal. the weather is going to be in control. If something does happen on October 15th, which is 2 days from now, okay, and the world goes into complete turmoil, we are going into winter. And if all of a sudden there is no power, like there was stories yesterday that Austria is now doing rolling blackouts because of power. You start getting into a lot of these places where there's no heat and then there's no food, you're going to have a mass die-off. And, that'll happen within the first month or so, starvation, but then you're going to have all the people that freeze to death. I mean, even where you and I are, it gets cold. And, so imagine being in Minnesota, North Dakota, New England, wherever it would be, and you have no heat. People are going to freeze to death. So that's going to shorten everything there. But then you get the second wave is those that survive it, and they're the winter, they're going to be looking for something next spring, next summer as things get going. And as you try to plant, how many people are going to try to steal something from your garden? I mean, we already hear stories from people. I've heard stories from people now down south that, they've got pear trees with pears on them, and they come out one day and all the pears are picked. Somebody just completely cleaned out, whether these are people coming across the border, who knows? But that's going to happen. You did all the work. Somebody else is going to swipe all your food. It'll take a couple of years before the marauders and everything like that have settled down. But who comes back? How does civilization recover? Does the same government that got us in this, whoever survived from that government, do they come in and go, gee, now we're going to be in charge and we're going to put all this back together? That's not going to do any good. Now you think we have a totalitarian government now. Imagine what the government would be like after any sort of SHTF. You think martial law is bad? That would, the government having helicopters and fuel, that's just going to make something very, very, very difficult. But yeah, I mean, a couple of years easy, and who knows how we come out the other side.
Yeah, and endless stockpiles of food. You see all these shortages all over the place. Not right now, but years prior, 2018, 19, there was a pea shortage one time. There was an ammo shortage. Like, you started to see something had gone downstairs, and the amount of containers that disappeared off the face of the planet, they were packed full and then put elsewhere. So that whole container shortage thing was just a way to explain away that, yeah, all the containers are being packed with continuity of government supplies and they're being put elsewhere. So that's why we need the containers. We actually need to use them now. Thanks for building them all for us. And 2008-9, great financial crisis. If anybody was around that time that remembers the 8 and 9 super run up in oil prices to like $147 a barrel. Silver crept up toward 50, and food was going insane as well. $5 gasoline. Now, if you don't remember that, you're young. But if you do remember that, at the same time, Thailand was having a problem with people coming in the middle of the night and harvesting the rice with mechanical harvesters. So what do they have to do? Station army troops in the fields all around during harvest season to prevent that same exact thing from happening. Yeah, pulling a few fruit off a tree is one thing, but going in with mechanical harvesters and cleaning out 5-6 acres of rice in an evening, that's something quite different. But you could imagine the same might be true with corn. I mean, there's a lot of farm equipment around. If you know how to run it and you had a crew with you, you could definitely take a few swipes up and down some fields, or just even go around in the middle and make a giant circle out there. And then, nobody would see, as long as you're running with the lights off. And if you had night vision equipment, you could go harvest most of a field and nobody even see you from any side, because you'd be looking at the outside of the fields. And if you just plunked yourself in the middle, you could clean that out there and run away with it. So I anticipate seeing a lot of repeats of theft of food, warehouses being raided, just through history too. A quick FYI, in the 1600s, around 1650, 1655, that era of those 5 years, British soldiers, the most dangerous post was accompanying the food supply from the field back to the cities. They were attacked 100% of the time. You got to realize, the British military at that time, they were very well equipped, like state of the art. But these guys on the sides of the roads were coming at them with pitchforks, rocks, these kind of things. attacked every single time the shipments relieved because they were stealing the food from the fields. So the people realized we're gonna starve out here anyway, so we might as well try to get our food back, take it back. 100% was the most dangerous post for a British soldier at that time. We're not talking about anywhere else, just in guarding the food from the field to the city. So how many repeats in history will we see this time with stolen food and food value increasing to the point people, it will be a life or death situation?
I mean, bring that down to a smaller scale. Imagine, I mean, this is very, very, very possible. Imagine having to post a guard on your garden every night, you know, and then imagine being that guard. And if you think about this, imagine having to defend that garden. Like you said, you know, the first time you pull the trigger, put that in your head and go, I just pulled the trigger and put that guy down over a tomato. You know, that, like you said, that's not something that you do on Tuesday and you forget about on Thursday. That sticks with you forever. You know, it will change who you are. I mean, majority of the people in this country have never seen a gunshot wound. I mean, a lot have seen it maybe in a deer, but very, very few have seen what a gunshot wound looks like in another human being. You know, and it ain't something you want to see.
Yeah, and getting some EMT skills, because every volunteer fire department needs people out there right now. And they're offering free training and even stop the bleed courses and things on how to use tourniquets and stop major injuries from bleeding, at least until you can get to better care. That's all free in your community. You just have to seek it out. And the people are more than willing to train you out, and you're going to get some life-saving skills at the same time. But going back to the garden thing, like, how good is our camouflage skill going to become? You know, right now, leaving the garden out in the front, and in the back, you drive up the driveway and you can see it on both sides. But in the future, that's probably going to be ringed by trees, and you're going to be hiding it as far back as you can with sunlight coming in, bouncing off mirrors to try to get that thing out of visual sight from aircraft, as well as people walking or driving around. I mean, how good or how well can we camouflage gardens will probably be a new skill set that emerges out of that too.
Yeah, I mean, but camouflage anything. I mean, how do you camouflage your herd of cattle? How do you camouflage your rooster crowing in the morning? You know, I mean, there's some that you just are not going to be able to do. And it leaves us all vulnerable at that point too. You know, you've got your gardens, you've got your rabbits, chickens, cows, pigs, whatever it would be. And they have no idea what's going on. The cow's not going, hey, great idea. You know what? There's people coming. I'm going to go hide behind a tree. They're just doing whatever they do. And sorry, dogs. But
see, you need those for intruder alert.
Yes, but you know, there's some that's just not going to be possible. So you are going to have to protect what you have by any means necessary. I mean, there's only so much you can do to prevent prying eyes from seeing.
So you're telling me then straight that camo paint on a cow is still not going to disguise it?
Yeah, I'm betting that's not going to work too well. Yeah, and a Kevlar helmet on a cow ain't going to do it either.
Yeah, because that's very, very much a real threat of animals being stolen. Happens all the time anyway in impoverished nations.
Yeah, happens here now. There's still cattle rustlers. You know, I mean, trust me, that's going to be a huge thing. I mean, imagine you're this little merry band of marauders running around, you know, 10, 15 people, and you see a cow. You stop, you go, we're staying here the night and until this evening, and we're going to go, you know, think cow tipping is something that college students do. You know, hey, we can go out there in the middle of the night, we slit the cow's throat, nobody hears us, we butcher up as much as we can. You know, there's 10 of us, we can carry a bunch of meat, we're out of here. The farmer goes out in the morning and there's, you know, a chopped up cow carcass out there somewhere.
You know, the coyotes coming in to nibble what they can get as well. And then the turkey vultures all feasting out there too.
Right, which now creates another problem for the rest of your livestock.
Yeah, right. Because I just recently bought a live weight lamb from the Amish, and he was saying, the guy I bought it from, was saying that 3 of their lambs had been taken by a coyote over the last, week and a half, because they're coming back in the hills here. They're on a migratory pattern too, and you can hear them up in the hills here in certain nights, especially when the sirens come by. For some reason, there were a couple sirens not too long ago, but when the sirens came by, all the coyotes started howling in the hills too. So natural predators, in your gardens are how, the Japanese beetle cycle, the worm cycle, the butterfly caterpillar cycle. I mean, organic's great. And again, you get this whole romantic idea of it's an organic farm, dude. But in reality, organic farm, you're going to get super minimal yield, nibbled to bits, and hopefully you can use a pair of scissors and cut around the good part of the leaf that's left after nature finishes with it. Because
Right.
if you want to eat it, they want to eat it.
Yeah. And that's just something that we are all going to have to deal with. It's not going to be easy. And like I said, too many people romanticize SHTF as going back to, how Little House on the Prairie. Okay. No, Little House on the Prairie was a TV show. Bonanza was a TV show. That's not how the real life worked. Go back and look at how people lived in the Appalachians in the 1700s, in the 1800s, whatever it would be. That's what you're looking at. You're not going to be able to pick up that iPhone and go, how do I skin a squirrel? There's not at your fingertips instructions on how to do something. You need to know how to do all that stuff ahead of time. And that's the one thing that I find most people are completely lacking in. That prepping is, gee, I've got a bunch of canned goods, I'm all good. Or gee, I've got a couple of rifles, I'm all good. Or, water is always my favorite one. Gee, I've got 50 gallons of water. I've got 3 55-gallon drums full of water. Congratulations, you've got about a month's worth of water.
If you could serve it.
Yeah, right. If you conserve, exactly. Prepping is survival skills, and I'm not talking bushcrafting or anything like that. I'm talking the basics. Do you know how to fish? Do you know how to clean a fish? Will you touch the worm? Any of that sort of stuff. Those are very basic skills that a lot of people don't have. And they're like, but what do I need? I've got, cans of tuna fish upstairs. I've got all the fish I need. Like I said, great. You got a year's worth of food. What happens on day 366? It's again, going back to what I said at the beginning, when World War II ended, life didn't go back to normal on Monday morning. Everybody goes, oh, okay, stores are open again, back to selling things, back to work I go. No, the entire continent was a disaster, and it took decades to rebuild it. How did you survive those decades? A lot of people didn't.
Ever take a look at the pictures of Dresden, 1946?
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome. And I had a quick question for you here. TVA and blackouts, because you were talking about blackouts already here happening in the United States, planned rolling blackouts through the winter. Yep. So the Tennessee Valley Authority, a lot of it's hydro and a lot of it's nuclear.
Right.
So, what's the comparison there between hydronuclear and coal or natural gas, wind, solar? Do you think that being here in East Tennessee with the TVA running on those two different pretty much renewables, that there would be power outages here in Tennessee? And, you could also make the same case for places like Washington, that there's an enormous amount of hydro over there, and different other places that British Columbia, they're using an enormous amount of hydro, adding new megawatt capacity every year. So what do you think about grid down or rolling blackouts for this part of the country using TVA's resources?
Well, I think we've got the resources, but again, how much of it is going to be diverted somewhere else? Just like when the whole thing in Texas happened last year, and they were buying power from Missouri and North Dakota and everything down there. Okay, let's say we have a complete catastrophic rise in the cost of coal and natural gas and everything like that, to the point it's not affordable. I mean, like Duke Energy telling the folks in North Carolina, expect for significant increases in power or in prices over the winter. Okay, so if their supply goes down, TVA is going to be selling supply to North Carolina, in my example here, and that is going to cause more shortages here and cause our bills to go up. So just because it's all these little regional areas, we're not safe because we're on hydro and nuclear, because it's going to come down real quick going, gee, we're all on coal. We don't have any power. We need to buy power from you guys. And that's going to dwindle the supply here, and the price goes up for everybody, because they're certainly not going to let, say, Washington, D.C. go dark and leave the lights on in Chattanooga. They're going to be like, nope, sorry, we need to send all the power up here. So DC's got power. And now, we need rolling blackouts down by you guys, even though it was all generated by TVA.
Yeah, that Texas was a huge eye opener. And I will draw a parallel, because in the UK, they said the exact same thing: expect significant rises in power prices. And then during the blackouts and that whole fiasco with grid down in Texas during the winter, significant prices also if you're able to get to the power. And if you've been reading a few articles out there about the price of the UK power increases, somebody was paying about £200 per month for their electricity to heat whatever flat or home, jumped to £1,400 per month. Now imagine that. You just switch it over into dollars. You're paying $250 a month, and then suddenly you get a bill one month and it's $1,800 for your electric.
Right.
Who's ready for that?
Nobody.
Who's ready for that?
Yeah. And hence why it's so important for people to have some sort of backup power system. I mean, to heat their home, especially, and to run the bare bones basic necessities. Do you have a backup heat source somehow? A wood stove, a fireplace, a propane heater, a little buddy, whatever it would be, to stay warm. It ain't going to be walking around in shorts in your house come December, but at least it's not going to be running around your house in a parka. And again, same thing on the power, to keep your refrigerator, to keep your freezers going. I mean, the bare bones necessities to keep your food fresh. You're not worried about powering up the internet or whether or not you can watch Netflix. You're worried about, okay, I've got meat in the freezer that I need to keep frozen. How can I keep that freezer running? That's the priority.
Well, if it's in the winter, you could take it outside, because if you leave it in your freezer, it's going to keep warming up. But then you need to worry about the predators coming in to smell that meat and want to come in and nibble it too. So hopefully you have some sort of plastic lockable box. But as well as I do, predators can get through pretty much anything if it's not made out of solid steel and double locked. I mean, animals are ingenious when they're hungry and they're sniffing food.
Yeah.
They're tough. Their jaws are tough, and they rip through things that you would consider impenetrable, but they're just nibbling through it like we're going through a Cheeto puff or something, right through that.
And then the area we're in, how often, I mean, we don't have that much winter that's below freezing, so, I mean, 40 degrees is a cold day, in the wintertime here. Okay, that's not good enough to keep my meat fresh. That's a refrigerator. That's not a freezer.
And it comes back, we were driving around not too long ago and saw an old root cellar carved into the side of a hill, had a concrete dome on it, had been disused, but still, with a little TLC, could have brought that thing back up to running again. And, things, who has a root cellar on their property? Yeah,
I built one.
I
built one.
Yeah, right. Again, the drainage issues with that as well. I'll just slap a hole in the ground and put stuff in there. Yeah, okay. Wait until the moisture creeps in on the sides there.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. You got to know what you're doing and everything like that. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time. I mean, like you said, October 15th, who knows what happens? I pray to God it's nothing. But, as we said at the top, it's coming. It's closer today than it was yesterday. And how is everybody going to do this? What are we going to do to community-wise to be able to survive whatever chaos is thrust upon us? Because we don't know. Is it economic? Is it war? Is it, wildfires? Is it drought? I mean, we don't know which one it is. You can plan for all of them and we'll get hit with an asteroid. I mean, you try to prep for everything, but there is no, again, one size fits all the prepping.
Yeah, and if it's an asteroid the size that wiped out the dinosaurs, at least I can run to the store and buy more toilet paper.
Well, that's when you have the sill that you need. You can just sit on the back porch, have a couple and say, okay, when I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah, that is it. All right, we've been going for about an hour, and I hope everybody got a little bit of info out of our conversation that can help you, because I'm learning and absorbing as well. Well, Ken was giving me a couple of new ideas here to think about moving forward in the days. So if you have any comments, please leave them in the description box below on how we can compare information. You got to keep your comms up. Does anybody have ham radios? I mean, I just got a new 10,000 watt CB antenna that I bought at a truck stop, no less, going down I-75. Usually the kits come a little tiny. I went over there. I said, I want a big one that receives 12, 15, 16 miles out. So he set me up with one. I mean, you just need to ask. All that stuff's there at the truck stops. I mean, the guys on the road are communicating minutely. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes, but you're going to have to be able to get some information flow. And then, what if I was going to want to get a hold of Ken? We don't have internet. How am I going to? Telephones aren't working. Cell tones are down. Hey, what channel are you on?
There you go. And I'm on the CB too. So all set there. Cool. Well, thank you for spending a little bit of time with me, David. I greatly appreciate it. And, I'm hoping that everybody who watches my channel goes and checks out David here on Adapt 2030. Definitely. Well, God knows you can find you all over the internet because there's enough information there to find. But because I think you're on pretty much every platform that exists. But yeah, guys, we need to be a community as a whole. And the more that we all work together, the greater we can share ideas. And that just makes us all better preppers, better people. We can never stop learning. Our brain is not concrete, it's sponge. So, the more we talk to each other, the better prepared we all get to be. So thank you again, David. Yeah, thank you. Now, on your side as well, you go to prepper.com, you got Pinball Preparedness there, and you got the Pinball Preparedness YouTube channel up, sort of for now. How else can people find info or contact you or take a look at what information that's flowing through your channels as well? It's basically the two on YouTube, Pinball Preparedness and Pinball Prepping. And then I've got the Rumble channel that's Pinball Preparedness as a, when there's stuff that I can't talk about, that's where the stuff goes there. But I always give everybody a hint on the YouTube if there's something critical to go over to Rumble. Yeah, we'll show you the white fluffy baby kitty right now, but go see the good info over on Rumble because there's nothing left. Yep, that's it. All right, anyway. Thanks so much for joining us. And Ken, thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time. Take care, y'all.